Hey everyone, it's John. I'm here with Terry Johnson again from Firearms Legal Protection, and today on John's Briefs, we are going to talk about a video on the channel that a guard drew a firearm and shot a guy to death who was threatening him, but also shot 3 other people. So we need to talk about that from a legal perspective. Today's video is brought to us by Firearms Legal Protection. Firearms Legal Protection is a legal defense program for lawful gun owners with a 24/7 emergency hotline and plans designed specifically for self-defenders. They are offering a discount on their plan to Ask fans, so hit the link in the description for that. Terry, once again, really appreciate what you guys do at Firearms Legal Protection to educate and to protect people in the event of a deadly force encounter. I really appreciate that. There is a discount for active self-protection fans in the description. So hit the link in the description, get yourself covered because you don't want to spend the crazy thousands of dollars that it'll take to defend you.
Tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands.
Yeah, right. You want 5 digits or 6, and we don't want none of that.
Exactly.
Go and get covered. So let's think about this one. This guard here, he gets goaded into drawing his firearm, and we aren't completely privy to the discussion.
Right.
But from what the news story said, the guy goaded him and said, you better draw your gun and shoot me because I'm going to kill you or whatever. And eventually the guard gets to this place. Let's just say he acted reasonably that, wait a minute, I was in imminent fear that he was about to kill me. And he was this big, strong, strapping dude and could do it and was incensed and all this. So I drew my firearm and I shot him. However, in the process, he recklessly shot everywhere and 3 other people were shot in this instance.
Right.
So from a legal perspective, Terry, tell me how that works, because he's trying to defend himself against an imminent threat, but does he face... Let's start with criminal liability for missing and hitting an innocent bystander?
Great question. From a criminal side, again, let's assume that he acted justifiably against the attacker.
So if he didn't, right, I think we can say if he wasn't acting reasonably and the guy was just jawing at him and calling him a punk and saying his mama's ugly, and he draws a gun and shoots him, well, now he's committing aggravated assault at the very least on everybody, right? He's acting unreasonably.
Exactly.
But let's assume his first one was a reasonable defense.
Yes. So if we assume that, and you mentioned he shot 3 people.
3 other people.
So the question becomes, what were the other 3 people doing? Were the other 3 people putting him in imminent fear of death or great bodily harm? I'm going to assume not.
Yeah, let's just say no. Yeah.
So if that's the case, he could be charged with things like reckless discharge of a firearm. He could be charged with aggravated use of a weapon, or in some states it's called felony firearm. He could be charged with assault with intent to do great bodily harm or assault with intent to murder. And you say, but wait a minute, Terry, this guy came at him. Correct. One guy came at him. Right. He wouldn't be charged with those crimes against that guy because he was acting reasonably and, let's say, justifiably under the circumstances. But because he missed and 2 or 3 other people were shot, now the prosecutor can bring charges against him for the use of that firearm against the other 3 people.
So let me check this. I haven't checked this with Terry beforehand, so I'm not, tossing softballs. Checking my understanding here,
Sure.
Terry, is that, okay, so if I carry a firearm for self-defense, which I do, and if I use that firearm, then it is inherent on me to act in a prudent manner with that firearm. And
absolutely.
If I shoot a bystander, then a prosecutor can make the argument that I was negligent in my actions because it's my responsibility to only shoot someone who is an imminent threat of death or grievous bodily harm to me. So
Correct.
Therefore, I'm acting in a negligent manner, and I could be argued that I'm doing so in a reckless manner.
You got it. Your understanding is perfect.
I love it. And if he chooses that, or she chooses that, the prosecutor can throw the book at you for that.
Oh, absolutely. And let's go back to the basic rules of firearm safety. What's one of them, which is know what's behind your target?
Yeah, you gotta keep your firearm pointed in a safe direction at all times, and pointing it at a bystander is not a safe direction.
And here's the other part about that, something we haven't talked about. What kind of ammunition do you use, right? Do you use a round that will go through any and everything? So I hit the person that was threatening me, in this case, this big strapping guy, as you described him, and let's say the round goes through him and it hits this guy's girlfriend.
Right.
So will a prosecutor look at your round and say, okay, you know what? This person's not acting reasonably because what they're using can go through a vest.
You might say, wait a minute, the use of full metal jacket rounds for self-defense, knowing that they penetrate, they don't expand, they don't stay in their intended target, could be considered negligent.
Absolutely.
That's an interesting argument. So then also we could get then, okay, so if he recklessly endangered someone else and then by definition he shot somebody that didn't need to be shot, we could consider that assault with a deadly weapon, aggravated assault, felony firearm. So you could face a host of criminal charges depending on the district attorney. Now your district attorney might go, well, he was reasonably trying to defend himself, he made a mistake, and we don't prosecute mistakes. Do you want to put yourself at the mercy of a prosecutor?
Well, that's one, and here's the other part. If you're in a city, and I'll pick on New York City for example, right? You're in a city like that, and you've had, you're allowed to carry there. Something happens. Let's say you're in Times Square. What do you think that prosecutor's going to do there?
Oh, he's going to throw the book at you.
Absolutely. And think about this. How many times have we seen other officers wounded by friendly fire?
Yeah, it happens all the time.
Yeah. Now, while they're not going to be prosecuted for that, that's kind of I hate to use the term a hazard of work. They understand that. But imagine if that were you as a civilian.
Yeah, you're not under that hazard. It's not an occupational hazard for you.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And here's the other bigger part of this, civil liability.
Yeah, let's talk about the civil suit now. So criminally, we could be facing charges and, of course, losing our freedom for a long time. These are felonies. But now let's talk about civil. What do you think there?
Well, let me backtrack just one moment here. Let's say you go to court and you were found not guilty of the other charges. For example, the 3 other people that were shot, your attorney was able to argue that you were not purposefully or intentionally trying to shoot them, et cetera, and you're found not guilty. Now comes the backside, which is the civil charges.
Different standard.
Huge difference, because now instead of beyond a reasonable doubt, where I like to say that's above 94-95%, we're now looking at about a 51+%.
Right. Preponderance of the evidence.
And it's
more likely than not.
Yeah, and here's the thing. You've admitted that you've done it. Everything's there. Now you got to look at maybe pain and suffering.
Mm-hmm.
You've got to look at potentially intentional infliction of emotional distress, all these other things that civil lawyers go through. I'm not a civil lawyer, but these guys find ways to take your money.
Well, and of course, if you are found to have committed an illegal act, therefore you have the liability, right? So maybe you didn't get convicted in criminal court, but civil court determines whether or not something was a criminal act, or an illegal act as well, a dispute between people, and and therefore, if you say, wait a minute, this was an illegal act that you did in shooting me, and so therefore you're culpable for it. Guys, most homeowners insurance policies they exclude intentional acts.
Yeah, because you pulled the trigger. Since you pulled the trigger, it's an intentional act.
Right, and illegal acts cannot be insured against, and so you're on the hook for that out of your checkbook.
Oh yeah, and let me tell you, civil cases go on for years. Criminal cases, there's a right to a speedy trial and other things that have been put into place, but civil cases,
Not so much.
they can go on, unfortunately, for a mighty long time.
Yeah. So the answer here, in my opinion, is marksmanship is king. If you're going to carry a firearm, you need to only press that trigger to the rear when you will put a shot in somebody who is a threat of great bodily harm or death, an immediate, imminent threat. That's it. You cannot miss because you're responsible for those.
Absolutely. And here's the other part of this. We at Firearms Legal Protection only protect you on the criminal side with uncapped attorney's fees. We also provide civil attorneys as well should you find yourself in a situation like this.
Right.
And you want to make sure you've got the right person defending you. Not necessarily the guy you see on the bus stop or, somebody that, goes on TV with the crazy commercials. You want someone that really knows what they're doing. And it's 2 different standards there.
Well, and this is important Terry, so here's my plug. I know you wouldn't do this, but I'm going to. Is that there's a couple companies that are doing things like this. However, a lot of them say, okay, well, we have a certain amount of pool for the criminal trial and for the civil, but the civil can last for so many years, and that can get so expensive, even way more expensive on the civil side than the criminal side in terms of what it costs in attorneys and expert witnesses and forensics and all that stuff.
It's draining.
It can be a highly draining thing. So make sure that you've got that and you get those questions answered. That can be a pretty big deal, and that can get expensive in a hurry. So it's one of the reasons that I really value firearms legal protection. So guys, get your marksmanship training. Be highly competent, because you don't want those rounds going elsewhere. And let me say at the very end, of course, not only from a legal perspective, a financial perspective, but from a moral perspective.
Absolutely.
If you harm somebody else, you are responsible to return them to the standard which they were beforehand. And you don't want that moral responsibility. So don't get there. Terry, sure appreciate the time, man.
Thank you.